following program is a presentation of the Options Insider Radio Network. For more programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio in iTunes. And now, it's time for the show that breaks down the options market. From unusual activity alerts to market updates and trading strategies. If it involves puts and calls, then our all-star panel will break it down. It's time to hit the Option Block. With your host, Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com and co-hosts Mike Tusaw from KnowYourOptionsInc.com and Mark Sebastian from OptionPit.com. The Option Block is brought to you by Options Express. Don't spend time worrying about your broker. At Options Express, security, stability, and account protection are the most important responsibilities to our customers. Secure account access, enhanced financial protection, entrusted with over $7 billion in customer assets, established financial stability. Options Express lets you trade with confidence. Stocks, options, and futures, all in one account. Trade with a specialist. Visit optionsexpress.com/OXradio to open your free account. Options Express is a member of FINRA, SIPC, and NFA.
All right, and welcome back to the Option Block, your bi-weekly source for options, wit, and wisdom, and occasionally entertainment. My name is Mark Longo from the optionsinsider.com, as well as the old Options Insider Radio Network. And joining me for this fine Monday afternoon on the old all-star panel, we have two returning regulars. Starting off with Mr. Federal Holiday Mike, who has not been able to join us for quite a while, so it's nice to finally have you back on the show. Mr. Mike Cavanaugh from Know Your Options Inc. How you doing today, sir?
Good. It's great to be back. We were bordering on me changing my nickname to Permanent Holiday Mike, so it's definitely good to be back.
NMM, No Monday Mike.
Yeah, no Monday.
Or No More Mike, perhaps.
It's starting to feel that way.
Well, glad we can get you back on the show today, sir. And also joining us in his regular seat is good old Mr. Mark Greasy Meatball Sebastian from theoptionpit.com. Mr. Sebastian, welcome back to the program as well, sir.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. It's nice that we got the all-star team here. I think this is all we need is Grigas, and we've got the starting lineup, if you will. We've got the 88 Lakers. There we go. Magic, you're James Worthy.
I get to have the goggles, huh?
You're Rambus.
You're AC Green. All right,
Rambus. Green didn't come till the mid '90s.
All right, and then Grigas can be AC Green, and Kyle can be Vlade Divac.
Jeez. Maybe I can be Larry Bird trading in for a one short season.
I like that. So,
but of course, you mentioned All-Star before, and last week you guys had your big baseball/trading extravaganza over at Option Pit. How did that go?
Oh, really fun. It was really fun. Unfortunately, we got to see Kavanaugh for a little bit, but ended up being a great time. Ate too much, drank too much, traded too much, you name it, we did too much of it. But it was a great time. And wanted to throw a special thank you to Mike Cavanaugh for hosting us in his beautiful trading area that he has at the Know Your Options Inc. headquarters.
That was it was our pleasure. I wish I could have been around more. We were right in the thick of a bunch of different meetings, so
right. No,
my apologies for not being around more, but it looked like you had a great crew back there. You could smell the calls and puts burning in that room by the end of the day. There was definitely some commerce being fostered in the options pit that day.
Yeah,
question.
I asked George if he wanted to join in mock trading, and he cut out and he said no for some reason. Not sure why.
Unless there's vodka involved, he's Ukrainian.
That's true.
You got to know your audience.
Mike Cavanaugh, the host with the most these days. But before we dive into the show proper, I do have a serious topic to discuss in the old intro segment today. I finally got around this weekend to watching the Wall Street sequel. Have either of you guys seen this thing? Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps?
Money Never Sleeps makes people go to sleep.
Wow. I finally got around to watching it. First off, let me say that subtitle makes absolutely no sense. I think that's a line that Gecko utters once sometime in the beginning of the movie, and then it has nothing else to do with the rest of the movie. And
Maybe it was the tagline, "Money never sleeps until it watches this movie," and then it's sleeping halfway through it.
It really, there was a clever moment in the beginning where they hand him his cell phone from their first movie, but they teased that in the trailers, and that is literally about as clever as the movie got, and that's in the first 5 minutes.
It would have been great if they'd have been smart enough to put a Daryl Hannah cameo in.
Yeah, I guess what they need. They need that train wreck in the movie to lighten it up a little bit.
Daryl Hannah could have done, if she, it would have been great if she introduced herself by the name she went by in Splash.
Oh, she had some crazy mermaid name, didn't she?
Yeah, remember it was
I'm sure our listener who wrote in last week asking for more 80s references would be very happy right now.
Yeah, I believe she actually led the way to every fourth girl in the United States being named Madison nowadays.
Probably. But yeah, the moral of the story was that movie was, it seemed to me like it was almost a Law and Order version of Wall Street, where it was ripped from the headline straight to it was all about loan defaults and Gordon Gekko trying to get in on distressed debt, but it wasn't done in any clever way at all. It literally was like they just dramatized all the things that have unfolded over the past few years with meeting behind the scenes at the Fed, but that actually sounds much more interesting than it actually was. It was literally about as insightful and interesting as if the Law and Order people had made their procedural by the numbers ripped from the headlines version of Wall Street. It was a disappointment.
Well, that's the problem. When people who have no understanding of finance try to write something about finance, turns into that.
That was the worst part. There were infographics going by, and Shia LaBeouf is trying to explain things in depth.
Who do you think knows less about finance? Hollywood writers or the SEC?
Maybe it was a collaboration. I think both were involved.
Let me just say this too. Shia LaBeouf is supposed to be this prop trader at this big, Wall Street firm, kind of like a Goldman, I suppose. But he spends all of his time, he's never trading. He spends all of his time, out there, making these deals. Essentially an iBanker, but they call him a trader. He's out there making these deals to fund some fusion company, because that's what he's funneling hundreds of millions of dollars into this fusion company, which of course every prop trader does. It was one of these movies that it really didn't really know what the heck it was coming from or what it was trying to say. It's like, if we just throw everything in that's happened over the past few years, something will seem relevant. Right. It was really to say it was disappointing is understating it quite a bit. All right, so that's my movie review minute of Wall Street Money Never Sleeps. And now let's dive right into the show proper with the trading block.
The trading block.
All right, and that cacophony means it's time for the old trading block, and it was an intriguing day on the street today. Everyone who's listens to this show for a while knows we've been talking about Greece for quite some time and the impact that those elections may have on the market. And in the near term, as soon as the announcements were out and as soon as the results were in, it looked like it might be a strong up and away for the old market. But as some of the details started to trickle in, that this wasn't exactly perhaps the panacea that we were all looking for, and more issues arising out of Spain, and of course the endless parliamentary details that still have to be worked out over in Greece, it took some of the bloom off the rose, and most of the major indices closed the day relatively unched or somewhere around there. S&P closed up nearly 2 handles to 1345 roughly. Dow down about 25 handles to 12741. The good old NASDAQ leading the charge, buoyed by Facebook primarily, up about 22 handles to 2895. And the good old VIX cash down about nearly 3 handles to 18.32. I think that's about as good a place to start as any. It looks like this almost seemed like an earnings event for the entire market across the board. You could see the vol coming out everywhere you look, just across the board. It was a great premium implosion. Is that what you saw today as well, Mr. Sabas?
Yeah, first let me make a quick caveat. The term greasy meatball is spelled Greas, not Greec. So it has nothing to do with the country of Greece. It has to do with the fact that I am greasy.
Thank you for clarifying that, sir.
Well, I wanted to make sure that people were aware. I don't want people confused. Yeah, it was interesting. This morning what's interesting is this morning it looked like the wheels might fall off. The market was kind of sitting there. Then when word that the PASUK and New Democracy were going to form a coalition, any of the rally that would have come from Greece happened last week, but the collapse and volatility of potentially a deal not happening is what we saw come out. So yeah, it was almost like an earnings event or an FDA announcement where the market was expecting the announcement to be positive, but there was enough fear of a bad deal that it was holding up vols, because we saw VIX collapse. And what's even crazier than the VIX collapse is now the spread between the cash and the futures. With June just about to expire, there's a point there. But if you look at the spread between July and cash, it's almost 4 points. It is a major, major spread there. And that's something traders need to be aware of, that huge contango between VIX cash and the VIX futures is very bullish. So I am not, at least between now and kind of middle of, beginning of July, I am giving you the official, much to my surprise, I don't think we've got anything going on through the 4th. I think it's going to be slow.
So load up on your VIX upside is what you're saying.
I mean, I think you hold off on any type of major vol pop play through the 4th, and then maybe you start playing it.
You could certainly see that we were poised, unless the bottom fell out. We were really poised for a great vol come up this morning, given what we saw going into the weekend, where everyone kept their powder dry on Friday. No one was taking any weekend out. If anything, they were loading up going into the weekend. So you knew, unless really the bottom fell out, this balloon had to come in, had to pop this morning, and it certainly seems to have done that across the board. You name the name, their premium came in today for the most part. It was pretty impressive. Pretty impressive across the board. We had someone writing in, our fan from last week, who asked about the Facebook, I believe it was the July 23 puts. He's quite a happy camper right now, as you can imagine, thanking us for our recommendation to sell the hell out of them. So yes, a lot of people excited on the degenerate premium side of the fence, but there was some other stuff going on today in the market. Of course, other stuff in the Eurozone with the Spanish loan issues still weighing on us, which seemed to be one of the main factors about why we really couldn't break through to much beyond unch today. There was some bullish news. We saw the NAHB housing numbers, their index of home builder sentiment. That hit the highest in 5 years, and a lot of people look at the home builder sentiment as really a great prognostication tool for what's coming down the road in the old markets, and it was the highest it's been in about 5 years today. Of course, looking in aggregate, and that number is still below 50, so still a bearish sentiment overall, and that seemed to weigh on the market as well. A lot of people now moving on from Greece to the big Supreme Court decision coming up in the next few weeks. Our friends over at Bloomberg had an interesting write-up about it today, and they looked at the trade data going up on InTrade, which is that Irish prediction market, and they were saying that the bets on that the individual mandate will be overturned or essentially ruled unconstitutional have gapped up from about 28% on that listing to nearly 70%. So a lot of people betting that the Supreme Court not going to look too favorably on that, and so we're seeing a lot of corresponding activity in the healthcare names today as people are moving on from positioning for the Eurozone to positioning for the great healthcare perhaps debacle to come. You guys been watching any of the healthcare trades these past few days? Mr. Kavanaugh, how about you?
I have not been watching very much in the form of healthcare trades. we're still kind of watching the Facebook, still heavily involved in Apple.
What do you guys watch on the Facebook
there's
side?
so much going on with the regulatory side of the business right now that, positioning yourself on any kind of regulation coming out, whether it's in healthcare or, the Dodd-Frank, the Volcker rule, what the future of the financial industry looks like. And there's a lot of shuffling going on right now. Cash is king. If you don't know how to play it, I've been kind of on the sidelines, admittedly, for the past 2-3 weeks.
Well, you mentioned the 800-pound gorilla. Not just Apple, of course, but Facebook seemed to be the one name that really lifted, of course, with Apple. Apple up 2% today to 585, nearly 586. But Facebook reversing the trend of recent weeks and finally closing up size, up nearly 5% today, sparking a lot of people to wonder what the heck is going on out there if suddenly the bulls have seen the writing on the wall in Facebook if the worst is over out there. Of course, a lot of back and forth in that name lately with the lawsuits, pointing fingers at NASDAQ, pointing fingers at the iBanker. A lot of interesting stuff going on. Of course, this thing gapping up today on really not much in the way of news, unless you want to consider last week's announcement that Apple's really going to integrate more Facebook stuff into their products. That's certainly a good news for Facebook. Which is
funny, because doesn't Microsoft own a bunch of Facebook?
Yeah, they owned about 15%. They bought that years ago, before Facebook was really...
Everybody made fun of them for the $5 billion...
Oh, yeah, it seemed absurd. I thought it was absurd at the time. They were valuing this no-name company at this ridiculous valuation level. And yeah, of course, in retrospect, given the madness of the IPO world, that, of course, seems like a great trade.
Yeah, I mean, they're up 10 times their money. Yeah, we got Microsoft coming out with their alleged Windows 8 pad today, right?
Secret announcement today. I don't think it's happened yet, right? I believe it's happening after we record. Microsoft closing today down about 20 cents, unched on the day. So I don't think the secret Windows 8 tablet that's going to kill the iPad, quote unquote, has been announced yet. But yet.
No, but we've been waiting for this to happen, correct? Some sort of serviceable, can be made by basically any manufacturer type pad to come out, correct?
Yeah, a lot of people have tilted at this windmill for a while. BlackBerry tried it. HP has tried it. Everyone's come out with some sort of attempted iPad killer.
But there's a big difference between HP and BlackBerry, and what makes this difference is that this is an operating system offering to a bunch of devices as opposed to the other way around. And Google, even Android never tried to be a real tablet maker, right? Well, they made like a tablet-ready Android. This is the first true software piece that's meant to take on Apple head-on. And you know what? When I'm looking at my iPad versus my MicroPad or my SoftPad or my MaxiPad, whatever
I hope they call it SoftPad. That's the best name ever.
Yeah, my SoftPad, and my iPad costs $800, and I can get a SoftPad for $300 that does 95% of the things. It's not going to be a tough decision.
Well, speaking of tough decisions, there is some interesting stuff going on in the land of Microsoft right now. I think we've touched on it a little bit in the past, but just the notion that at this point right now, it looks like pretty much front month vol in both these names is almost interchangeable. They're both a wee bit south of 30, Apple versus Microsoft, which is a crazy scenario when you think about just what Apple's been up to of late versus Microsoft, which has been a resounding meh for years. And the fact that you could scoop both of these vols at essentially the same rate, that offers a lot of opportunities, methinks, going forward. If you had to buy one vol right now, Apple or Microsoft, where would you be loading up?
Oh,
that's a hard one.
Apple vol's super cheap, right? Relatively speaking. The VXAPL is $26.80. If you look back on it, other than a while, that's pretty much near the low of the year, sans the time that Apple vol actually completely tanked. And you and I said, everybody buy Apple vol. You remember that, Mark?
I do. It's one of the few times we jumped into the premium buying side of the equation on this show.
We were like, you and I and Kavanaugh and even Tim Navabi were like, buy it.
We just didn't let Don Schlesinger on the buying game. But yeah, it's interesting.
I think we're starting to get there with Apple, but if you look at Microsoft, that vol's pretty cheap too.
That's almost it's about 27 there as well. But
I will sell Microsoft vol until Microsoft proves it can break out of the $28 to $32 range.
Well, that's the best thing about Microsoft. It's been the longest screaming sale in terms of vol for years. I think one of the last few earnings are some of the first times it even managed to overcome its front month straddle. So this is the name that's just been a screaming premium seller's name for so long, and to now see that they're on the same terms as Apple, that's a fantastic, I think, buy Apple vol, sell Microsoft vol, unless this tablet here knocks it out of the park in some insane way that just rewrites the future. Of course, they have Windows 8 announcement coming later on this week, but everyone knows what's coming there as well. This interesting dichotomy. You don't see Microsoft and Apple trading at the same relative vol very often. But with that dichotomy in mind, I think we're going to close out the old trading block for today and dive right into the odd block.
It's time to break down the most interesting, unusual, and downright questionable options activity that's been identified by theoptionsinsider.com. It's time for the Odd Block.
All right, and that funky tune means it's time once again for the old Odd Block. And we're going to kick things off today with a newcomer to the Odd Block. They are Harman International Industries, ticker symbol HAR. They closed today down about 2.5% to 36.40 on the day. Now, this is the name that does about a whopping 500 contracts a day. Today, they did nearly 8,000, and 7,500 of those 8,000 contracts, so essentially all of the additional ADV for today, came in one three-legged downside spread. We saw someone coming in and hitting about 2,500 of the July 37 half puts for 220, then picking up 2,500 of the July 35 puts for about $1.21, and then turning right around and selling the July 30 puts 2,500 times for 23 cents. That whole thing nets out to about $1.22. When you first look at it, it looks like some sort of weird hybrid butterfly, but not done 1 to 2 to 1. But then you look at it again, you start digging into some of the OI numbers here, especially on this 37 half strike. There's about 2,700 contracts open here, which implies that someone had a existing long position on these July 37 half puts that they're deciding to roll down and just roll down instead of just naked puts actually rolling into the 35-30 put spread instead. So we have a relatively sizable bear for this name. This is someone trading 5 times the average daily volume in each one of these legs, that someone putting on and maintaining their sizable bearish position, just rolling it down a wee bit given all the latest developments in good old HAR. So an interesting one for at first glance, it looked like a put stupid. That's why I wanted to call Tucson on this one, because I know he loves his stupids. But then it turns out to be just an interesting roll, but a roll nonetheless. Either you guys watch HAR at all before I move on to the next name?
No, I don't.
I don't either.
This is not
it looks exactly like what you said. Somebody probably owned the 37 halves, and they're rolling that into a put spread.
Mike, if I knew you were going to be on the show, I would have tried to dig up some of that what's in that company?
Manitowoc. Yeah, we could get right into the skinny on that one.
Yeah,
back to the 50s.
Good stuff there. But instead of Manitowoc, I do have Mo for you. Molina Healthcare. Close. This is a name that does it closed about 22.5 today, down about 0.7%. And this is a name that does about a whopping 200 contracts a day. They did nearly 5,000 today. The bulk of that was on 2 sizable put buys. Looks like paper came in and picked up the Dees 15 puts 2,000 times for 70 cents, and then the Dees 17 half puts also 2,000 times for $1.55. These are a little bit confusing because both of these trades went up essentially mid-market and for some reason were listed as buy rights. which is what you all know. We do a lot of buy rights in the puts, but the interesting stuff nonetheless. So some sizable puts going up. Looks like a put stupid essentially. I don't see much in the way of open interest that really would offset that indicate that they're rolling from somewhere else, unless they are extending an existing position in the SEP 15 puts. It's about the only place where there's any open interest right now. There's about 2,000 open of those. So it could be an existing bear who's just loading up in addition to his existing SEP 15 position and can't decide where he wants to go. So he splits them between the D15 and D17 half puts. And then last up on the old odd block, we have WR Grace, ticker symbol GRA, and what we saw today was another interesting trade. This is the name that usually does about 1,700 contracts a day. They did 10 times that, or nearly 18,000 contracts today, and a good chunk of that, about 16, nearly 17,000 of that, was in essentially one big put spread. We saw paper coming in, picking up about 8,300 of the SEP 45 puts, and then selling the same amount, 8,300 of the SEP 45 puts for $1.15. They did the whole thing, netted it out for $1.20 debit. And there's a lot of open interest on both of these strikes, so it looks like potentially this could have been the closing out of a short put spread, or even rolling of some short puts down to from the 45 strike to the 40 strike. Our analysts didn't have time to really dig in to see what was going on with that existing open interest when it was open and exactly what they were doing. But either way, they're rolling this position apparently out here in GRA. So interesting stuff. Some sizable spreads, some sizable rolls going on in the old odd block today. And now, because the boys from OX could not make it on the old program today, we're going to dive into the old listener mail block right now.
Now it's time to empty the mailbag and see what our listeners have to say. It's the mail block.
All right, and welcome to Listener Mail. This is, of course, a portion of the show where you guys get to chime in and we get to dance to your tune. And today's tune for us dancing monkeys comes to us from a listener who goes by the handle optionsvoodoo. He posted this in our forum at theoptionsinsider.com, and the title of his thread was The Dying Breed of Floor Traders. And he writes, with the dying breed that is the floor trader, can you share the craziest / scariest story / stories that you remember from your days on the floor? Being a younger guy myself and having only traded behind the friendly confines of the computer screen, I often think to myself that I can't entirely appreciate the origins of the market, having never been a part of that dying culture. And we're lucky here on the show today to have three people who were part of that quote-unquote culture for quite a while, and I think I have mixed views on the fact that it is going away. Maybe I'll start first, give you guys a time to think.
Yeah, I mean, I would start there. I think it's changing. I don't think it's going away. I think if you look at the Merc, someday they'll take that pit and turn it into like computer stations where people hang out. And even in the SIBO, there's still guys that go down there. So it may not go away entirely. You know, there's a reason why the ICE is actually talking about opening up a floor. And so I would throw that out. Now, is it the floor the exact same way of guys yelling around running, going, hey, buy and sold? No. But the concept of a central trading place, I don't think will ever go away. Even if you took away the floor, quote unquote, of the CME, the series would be a de facto floor because all the traders would still be meeting there drinking, and that Wall Street area and the LaSalle Street area would still be a de facto floor, even if you took away the floors themselves.
Well, yeah, you're right. Ceres has pretty much migrated into becoming the de facto biz dev hub now that perhaps the trading hub of it is kind of going away a wee bit. But you're right. There still is a need for these floors to do complicated spreads. Of course, what we've seen, all these products that you referenced that are still alive are, of course, the heavily protected products like the SPX and like the CME products, where there really aren't competitors to come in to eat their lunch. So those products have survived and indeed thrived in this environment. But a lot of the other ones that are a little bit more open, like your multiple listed equities and things like that, have long since pretty much shriveled and died. Last time I was down at the SIBO, I was for an event in the members lounge. I happened to glance down. I used to like being able, when I was trading in Intel, I could go right up to the members lounge, and right below me was my pit, so I could sit there and watch. And if a walk-in came in or something like that, I could run right down. Last time I was down in the members lounge, I glanced down at the old Intel pit, and not only was there no one, not even one or two guys there at DPM streaming quotes, the entire pit was gone. It was dismantled. There was nothing there anymore, which was, I think, a bit of a sad reminder of the way things are going. But getting to Options Voodoo's question about the craziest thing, I've been trying to mull over. Maybe I'll think of something that actually, while you guys are thinking of your craziest stories, I'll get the ball rolling with...
there's a couple that I can... This is Mike Kavanaugh.
If you want to jump in, you probably saw some fun stuff in the...
Permanent holiday, Mike.
In the bond floor over there at the board, a fun place to cut your teeth.
The bonds, a couple scary moments for me. Like, there's trading stories, and then there's, probably the most memorable stuff where, there was a kid that was a clerk in the wheat pit that, you're dealing with type A's across the board, and there's a lot of testosterone flying, and when somebody says they can drink a gallon of milk in 30 minutes, that seems to trigger... Not
that one again, or the McNuggets, or all the variations
there was
in.
The hard-boiled eggs, the Big Macs, 12 Big Macs in a minute, whatever it was. Somebody was always trying to eat saltines in under a minute, like 3 packages of saltines, without drinking water. I mean, there were those kind of crazy things. There was a kid in the bond pit that used to play. He was a running back at Illinois. I can't remember his name, but the bond room is a fairly large room, and he could run the upper deck from the bond room in under 15 seconds. And when he tried it, they would time him, and the whole place would watch it. Talking about a room full of 4,000 people watching this guy run at like noon from one end of the bond room to the other. So there was always those crazy kind of stories. Like trading-wise, the scariest moments on the floor were when a market made a big move quickly that wasn't surrounded by any type of number. There was either a pending news release that had just hit the wire or something that nobody really knew what was going on. And the scariest moment for me was September 11th, 2001. We were on the floor, and we saw on the big screen the second plane hit the building, and within 3 minutes there was a SWAT team running through the floor, full gear, with the M16s, evacuating the floor. That was the scariest moment for me by far. Like, still remember that day vividly.
Yeah, I was fortunate in that regard. I had left the floor a week before 9/11, so from a downside or from a craziness perspective, I was relatively fortunate in that sense. But I'm just trying to think. I think some of my introduction to that life was probably some of the craziest things that I could think of, because you're coming from the relatively staid world of college,
right,
and then all of a sudden I dove into the back of the SPX pit. Granted, I had been on the floor for a while, training as an assistant clerk, but then I was literally, before the SPX expanded, I was breaking into the backs. I was brand new to the floor, essentially, last guy in the back of the SPX. Nobody knew me worth a damn. And on top of having to break into that crowd, which was fun, another firm wanted my same spot, and they had this, back in the day, a lot of firms had the age-old practice of hiring the leftover Division I Division I linebackers and things like that to stick them in the pits so that they could hold spots. So I had to contend with some guy who was like 6'6", 270, pushing and shoving against me the entire time for about a month or two.
Is that what drove you to grow your goatee?
Exactly. That's why I had to terrify that man. Nice. But so that was my introduction to the markets, trying to make markets in the back of this thing where no one knew the hell you were, having to shout over you. It's intimidating enough as it is. Add in that physical presence of having to physically combat with someone else while you're making markets, while things like, the rumors of Yeltsin being dead or crushing the market, or things like, the 18 times Yeltsin died, or perhaps the time when, when Rubin stepped down unexpectedly and people were picking off the entire pit, buying puts before that news came out, or a lot of crazy things like that were interesting. Of course, when I transitioned out into Intel, I had the good fortune again to have another firm send a guy who used to be a former, I believe it was a New York Islander enforcer, out to try to take my spot. So I had a similar experience again, another guy about 6'5", 280, contesting with me while I was trying to hold that spot. So that physical element is lost in the memories of it. In terms of, I think, fun trading moments, If you remember back during the late part of the dot-com bubble, this thing started to turn ugly, and one of the first real harbingers of that was when Intel, this big name out of, the big tech name along with Microsoft and a few others, all of a sudden out of the blue pre-announced bad earnings, which was this was the time when everyone was just buying every tech name they could think of. So this was a huge slap to the face. It came out right after the close. The stock instantly down like 25% off the news, and it was a crazy night of hedging gamma, all kinds of fun stuff. When I came in the next morning, the stock's down close to 30% now. I was fortunate. I had some downside. I like to practice decent risk management, so I actually had some bullets to sell into the teeth of this, which was nice. But coming into the pit, I'll never forget it. It wasn't that big of a pit, Intel, 25 guys, which back in the day, a couple of hundred was the norm for some of these big ones like Dell or AOL. It was a quiet day on the rest of the floor, so literally half the rest of the floor had gathered around our pit for the open to watch, like some sort of spectacle. And then literally the walk-ins were lined up, as far as you could see down the floor. So that was a fun day from a trading perspective, and also I think a trading terror perspective. But that was a fun one, at least from my memories. Mr. Sebastian, we'll let you close it out. Amex, SIBO, whatever you prefer.
Yeah, a couple of my two favorite things to do to clerks was to send them to get me a box of upticks.
Oh, you weren't one of those jerks who was doing that, were you?
And then
I hated guys like you.
The other one was the keys to the clearinghouse. I always needed the keys to the clearinghouse so that I could go get my clearing. No, I think one of the rather than some sort of look at this story. I probably between us have the most time down there. And my favorite story to this day involves my buddy Tim. And it was when we were first clerking. He was standing by the Q pit on the Amex, and him and another buddy named John got in an argument over how many donuts a guy could eat in 20 minutes. Well, Tim was about 6'7", and lo and behold, the number ends up being 22. All right, so because I think Tim said something along the lines of, I could eat more than one a minute, and over 20 minutes. And it was maybe one of the slowest days of 2001. This is this is early summer, so let's call it July or August before September 11th goes down. And it was so slow that Tim is sitting in the middle of the NDX/Q pit eating Krispy Kreme donuts, boxes of them lined up. There are guys calling in bets from Chicago and Philadelphia. And we had a couple of the better-looking clerks walking around with like ring girls holding up signs for how many donuts he was in. And then he did 22, and then somebody said, could you still eat? And Tim's like, yeah, of course I can still eat. So then all the bets start flashing for 24 and 26. By the end of the day, my understanding was somewhere along the lines of $20,000 had changed hands.
That's something I have forgotten in the post-Floor days, is that the culture of eating contests that exists and drinking contests that exists down there is absurd. McNuggets, milk. You're right. The bets come out. I remember clerks doing McNuggets bets coming in from New York and whatever over the phone lines on slow days. Brokers making markets and clerk eating contests. So yeah, that's a part of the culture I perhaps don't exactly miss. Given the you don't really encounter too much once you leave the floor, which is perhaps a good thing. People wonder why it's such an odd environment, and that's because you take a lot of guys with a lot of money and a lot of alpha personalities and stick them in an enclosed environment, and it's a good social experiment. You see what happens in a short amount of time.
The Saturday Night Live skit with John Goodman, Will Ferrell, and Alec Baldwin, the Bill Brasky.
Oh yeah.
Hey, Bill Brasky's 40 feet tall, and he whatever that was like the Tom Baldwins, where the big traders, like somebody would say, hey, I saw Tom Baldwin trade a 40,000 contract order and from Mexico when he was drunk, or stories just got like out of proportion, but there was always that like Bill Brasky mechanism. One of the funnier competitions I ever saw, and there's probably some truth to it or not. One of the guys in the bean pit was an all-state basketball player in high school. And there was a kid that was rumored to have toured the exchanges in the United States and he basically infiltrated the exchange, and within 3 months identified the biggest ego person on the floor that was any good at basketball, and he challenged him to a $100,000 game of horse. And the guy was about 4'7" and probably weighed 400 pounds, and he shot from his hip. And,
oh my gosh!
He took this guy to the ringer. There was 400 people at the basketball court at the Union League Club to watch this guy play horse. It was quite the you could write a movie about it. It was quite the event. You had like the Judge Smales side betting going on each shot.
Oh, nice.
Heckling. It was pretty fascinating.
Where people are going, Noonan!
Yeah, total Noonan stuff going on.
Miss it!
That's the one thing that hasn't been done yet. There hasn't been the true movie chronicling the floor trading experience. I don't mean that documentary about. Yeah, it's kind of hard. I mean, that's why we laugh about things like Wall Street and things like that don't even. They don't try to do the floor trading. They even try to get the trading experience.
The closest thing to recreating the floor trading experiences in terms of movies?
Caddyshack.
No, trading
places.
Yeah, trading places was, of course, except for the fact that they stride into the middle of the FCOJ pit on the crop report day, walk right into the middle of the most primo spot on the pit with no badges, no nothing.
You know what? There's a badge for you.
Lee Stern could do that today if he wanted to. No, it's true.
What's the Kevin Bacon one where he's a bike messenger, but then he walks into the pit on earnings on a visitor's badge?
What is that?
He starts trading on the P Coast, and he's I forgot what Quicksilver.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry, but you make that you actually, that's where you're wrong, Mark. Or is that on like the NYMEX and the CME and the Board of Trade. In the 80s, there were these guys that were like 50 years old, or that were, at the time now, 60 years old. They could walk into any pit they wanted to, and people cleared out of the way, and those guys did the trades they wanted, because everybody in that pit owed those guys something. Well, it's the truth.
There might have been a Turner Machines back on moment once or twice.
You know who Lee Stern is, right?
Yeah.
He could walk into the middle of the hog pit and say, when in the middle of everyone's yelling in a huge frenzy, and if he said, I want in, everybody get out of the way. Because that's the way it is down there.
I'd like to see that done on a visitor's badge. But yeah, you're right. Trading Places is probably the best one, of course.
Don Schlesinger could probably still pull that off if he wanted to.
I don't know if Don ever was on the floor, was he? He was more upstairs at Morgan Stanley.
Yeah, he was.
But, yeah, Trading Space is probably the best, also because the modern trading world has incorporated that so much that it's pretty much recreated that film on the floor. How many times a day did you hear someone say, turn those machines back on?
The only thing that was inaccurate is the snootiness of Dan Aykroyd. Everything else dead on.
I think everything was inaccurate in that. In fact, next time you watch that movie, if you haven't seen it in a long time, watch Eddie Murphy when he's supposedly taking orders at that trade at the end, and then listen to the commentary on that movie about what he's actually thinking when he's doing that. It's pretty funny. The guy is just a complete mockery of floor trading, but it's still pretty fun. But yes, and Trading Place is probably the best. Aside from that, there was that weird Ewan McGregor movie where he was trading in Singapore, supposedly trying to be Nick Leeson, but that one wasn't that great either. So not a mixed bag when it comes to representing the floor.
What I was saying is kind of recreate kind of the culture. Two guys upstairs. I could absolutely envision a situation where two guys bet $1 to see whether they could ruin some guy's life and make another guy a winner.
I have no issue with. That I could see going down all day long, given the activity I've seen on some of these guys take on the floor. Well, Options Voodoo, I hope we've painted a picture for you, perhaps not exactly a pretty one, but a picture nonetheless. I think the moral of the story is you didn't miss too much, just a lot of bizarre hijinks for the most part, and a lot of awful people doing awful things on top of it, with occasional bright spots punctuated in between.
Oh, he's actually pretty funny. He missed a lot, in my opinion, actually. That's what I would say.
Interesting. Well, there you go. Mr. Kavanaugh, round it out for us, sir.
Trading Places was a very good pit trading documentary. I think the movie that sums it up the best was Rogue Trader with Nick Leeson, the Nick Leeson story. That's how it really is.
That's the one that's the one that he trades in Singapore, and
the 5/8 account.
Yeah.
I mean, the floor, I would say, was great for two reasons. One was the people. There was definitely a camaraderie in passing, like the social aspect of it. But there was a part of the floor that business got done. Business got done the right way, and that was people looking each other in the eyes saying, I will buy this, and somebody on the other side saying, I will sell that to you, and it worked. And
yeah, and it's not
my word is my bond. It's a different way of doing business. I always compared it to the cartoon with Wile E. Coyote, not with the Roadrunner, but with the sheepdog, where they're like, hey Sam, hey Fred. Then they check into work and beat the crap out of each other for 8 hours. Yeah. At the end of the day, they check out and they say, hey, you going to go get a beer? Yeah, I'm going to go get a beer. And then every day, the next day, the guy might be your best friend off the floor, but you're in the bowels and the pits of capitalism in its purest form, and business got done in huge numbers. You made a mistake, you ate it. And the social aspect was fun, but the respect I have for the people that carried themselves in a manner of a professional, as funny as that word sounds, correlating it to the floor for guys that wore like cut off jeans to work, but the professional bond it created with others, that it might be $1 million on a transaction and you might be wrong, but if you made an error, you ate it. And you knew doing business the right way would come back and reward you in some fashion.
That's true. There was a level of accountability to when you were putting up the trade and you were putting your bid and offer and the broker said sold to you and he looked you in the eye and he hit you with however many you got. There was an implied responsibility there, whereas you knew if you tried to break that trade or something else happened, you couldn't go back to that spot again the next day. So there was an accountability there. Exactly.
There'd be 10 people on you saying, hey, that guy made a trade with Longo and he's out in the room saying he didn't do it, and we all know Longo did it, nobody would talk to the guy. He'd be done.
Yeah, so there was that level of accountability, which has kind of somewhat gone the way of the dodo, along with everything else that was floor-based. Well, thanks for that question again, Options Voodoo, a great question. And now we're going to roll right into our Around the Block segment.
Around the Block.
All right, welcome to Around the Block, and with Greece in the rearview mirror for the most part now, Facebook rallying, Apple rallying, what are you guys paying attention to most? Perhaps we'll start with you, Uncle Mike, Federal Holiday Mike, give you pride of place, sir, on your returning show. What do you keep an eye on these days?
I've been watching the S&P and gold. Of all things, I've kind of taken myself out of watching just specific names. Watch the Facebook IPO a little bit and watched Apple a little bit, but probably once every 4 years, once every 5 years. I own the business part of my business as well, and we've got some business matters that have kind of taken the front seat in the last couple of weeks. So, George, Chris, Mike, the guys in the office, Kevin. They're watching the markets. I haven't had a chance to talk to George today to see what he's looking at. I know he sent out a blurb earlier this morning. He's looking at a couple issues: CERN, QC, OR, CYBX. I just haven't had a chance in the last 24 hours to catch up with the PMs on the desk to see what they were looking at. And honestly, you see the S&P up 14 before you go to bed, down 14 when you come in, and flat at the end of the day, and the VIX down 2 points. It's a head scratcher. So something's coming down the pipe. I don't know what it is. So, if you don't know, you just kind of lay off a little bit. So I've been laying off a little bit.
Always fun when the business encroaches on doing the business, is it not?
Yes. So much fun.
We have that problem over here all the time. I would love to be sitting at my screens trading more often than I am, but the business has a way of encroaching. Mr. Sabas, aside from finishing up your big baseball extravaganza last week, what else has been going on? What else are you watching coming down the pike here at Option Pit?
This VIX, I think that we've got the VIX heading for 17, maybe lower. There may be some sort of, who knows. But I just don't see a lot. I don't see a lot coming. I think you want to be short vol between now and the 4th of July. At least the week leading up to the 4th of July. They'll probably take out the 4th. Well, we'll be back and around, but probably by the time we do our show a week from Thursday, they'll have taken out all the 4th of July. So, that'd be the one thing. I think you might look to get ahead of the long weekend. That'd be about it.
That'll be an interesting change of pace from what we've seen of late, with so many people so leery, so hesitant to hit those bids going into long weekends, given all the crazy scenarios we've seen lately, like non-farms coming in on Good Friday and crazy stuff like that, the Greek elections on the weekend. Everyone's kept their powder dry, and now maybe we'll get back to the good old days when you start selling the weekend on Wednesday.
That's the big thing is we've got the employment report after the 4th of July, so you'll have time to come in and buy it. They're gonna get out in front of it, I'm telling you. They're gonna get way out ahead of it, in front of it.
A return to the good old days of selling the long weekend the week before.
Yes.
All right, thank you for that, and that abbreviated Around the Block. Unfortunately, that's all we had time for because we waxed nostalgic in the listener mail block, but...
Memories! No, I'm just sorry.
Yeah, yes, I'm very sorry as well. I'm sure all of our listeners are as well, but that is going to do it for the Around the Block segment. That's also going to do it for this episode of the Option Block. But before we go, I want to thank my cohorts, my partners in crime, the yins to my collective yang, for joining me on the show today. And starting off with you, Mr. Federal Holiday Mike, aside from the obvious 800-pound gorilla in the room over at KYO, is there anything else going on that you'd like to let our listeners know about?
How dare you call Mike an 800-pound gorilla?
No, Sweetman gets offended. I've seen him get really mad when somebody says that. Bad joke. We've got one of our little lunch and learns, our Friday Advisor Network seminar coming up this Friday. Our good friend over at Latimer, LeVay, and Froyek Law Firm, Puneet Jam, is going to be talking about gifting opportunities for estates. I know there's a bunch of tax stuff coming out down the pipe here. Really doesn't have anything to do with options other than knowing what your gifting options are to avoid Uncle Sam if you're looking at starting to split your estate up. That's coming up this Friday. We do one of those every other week. I'd be more than happy to have people show up to those. We usually get about 10 people, and we cut it off because our conference room only holds 10. But anybody interested, just hop on the old Know Your Options website, knowyouroptionsinc.com, and register on the stopwatch.
Gotta love the old lunch and learns. Skip the salmon, in my experience. Stay for the steak. That's the good stuff. All right. And Mr. Sebastian, you just had your big extravaganza. Anything left coming out?
Buy my book.
Oh, the book. Yes, the book.
Yeah, you keep Mark. You keep threatening to put out a little blurb about it, but everybody buy my book, and I have an autographed copy. I'll bring you tomorrow, Mike. Or not Mark. Mike Kavanaugh, you have to buy it. Mark, I got one for you.
I look forward to it, sir. And, of course, if you're interested in learning more about any of the topics we discussed on the old show today, then surf on over to theoptionsinsider.com. You can find all of the education, the analysis, the unusual activity, the breaking options news, and much more over at the old site. You can also find all of the episodes of this program, as well as many others, on the old Options Insider Radio Network. Of course, you can also find us on iTunes and Stitcher and just about anywhere else fine podcasts are sold. But before we wrap up this episode of the Option Block, everyone here on the old All-Star panel wants to extend our thanks to you, the listener, for downloading and streaming and subscribing to this program and making it such a success. And we'll see you next time right here on the Option Block.
Become a part of the Option Block. Just visit www.theoptionsinsider.com/forum to post a question for the hosts. You can also submit questions to twitter.com/optionblock or leave a voicemail at 312-544-9356. Make it interesting, and your question just might make it on the air. The Options Block is property of the Options Insider Incorporated. All rights reserved. preceding program was a presentation of the Options Insider Radio Network. For more programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com/radio or search for Options Insider Radio in iTunes.